the ARS SIG sprint planning video, and it's for winter 2017. I'm Samir.
I'm Bomani.
So for starting from last quarter, we worked on the research canvas prototype. For the canvas, we did some conditional formatting. So if we, it was mostly on format. So if we really wanted it to show like, if it said if then the format will say like please use the if then format. So that was one thing that we did with this. So if you use if, then it should like tell you not to. So some giving students some actionable feedback as well as a sidebar on the side to give them some help. So just like walking them through the steps. One thing that we also did was that we created a sidebar interface. So we really wanted to show like, oh, here's the definition of a design argument. So we had 4 categories there. Specifically design arguments. So if you highlight the format, then it'll show you what it is in the example, as well as the definition of that specific thing. So like a characteristic is a trait, and affordance are the methods or techniques, and the arguments are like the reasons for the affordances. So then we did a pivot.
Yeah, so after kind of observing the research map that was created by Haoqi Zhang and Matt yesterday and is still in the process, one of the things we realized about our previous design is that we really needed a little bit more instructional scaffolding around teaching students how to go about the research process. And so we brainstormed a totally new approach for a full system that integrates more stakeholders. And so we made a diagram for this. This is what we're calling the research planning system, and I'll talk a little bit about sort of the major subsystems here. So all of this is powered by a research map graph. So using the research map framework from Haoqi and Matt, basically students answer different questions, and the fidelity of the question answers powers some of the next steps that the students are suggested to utilize or to take on in their next week of work. So one of the important things here is that students do the work, they answer the questions, and then it generates a snapshot which is able to be reviewed by peers in this system, but most importantly by mentors in the SIG meeting. And so this snapshot essentially just summarizes student work and then shows the next steps that the student will be taking as suggested by the system, so that the mentor and the student can agree on these different things. We also have a flagging system where students can kind of let the community know about some of the issues that they've had over the course of the week and get feedback on those things really quickly. So we started by designing a sort of just a visual prototype of the snapshot, and we wanted to start with the snapshot because we felt that it was one of the things that was both, standalone. We could kind of prototype this without having to develop the rest of the complex system. We thought it was also a pretty low risk direction, and we also felt that it met some of the user needs for a couple of different stakeholders, particularly for students who wanted to do better with their research planning at the high level, and also for mentors who needed some tools to be able to provide better feedback to students in the SIG meeting. So as you can see in this design, we have 2 sections. The top half is a retrospective section, and the bottom half focuses on next steps. Work retrospectively is framed in design arguments. So here for design argument 1, basically you can see all of the answers to some of the questions from Haoqi and Matt's research map that students have marked here. And then these sections here denote the fidelity of these answers as marked by the student. So you can see that their design intervention section has like 0 fidelity, confidence as marked by the students, and the broader impact is something that the student has worked on a little bit more, so they have a higher confidence out of 5. And then you can kind of move through the design arguments. For the next focuses, these are different things the system has suggested that the student answer in their next week of work, and each of these is associated with some best practices for completing that work. So as you can see here, what is your design argument is associated with best practices to review example design arguments for published DTR papers and utilize the design argument format, somewhat like we showed on our previous slide here.
From this, we actually did like initial tests and like prototype. That's not this one shown here, just to get a little bit understanding from a SIG head. Wasn't used in a meeting, but we got some feedback, and this is the design that we came up with. So we implemented in Material UI, and the main kind of points are like the retrospective part, which is the project context, that shows like the steps before the design argument, and then everything else is under the design argument. Main like features are like if it's green, then it shows that it's changed. So over like what has changed between a last sprint and this sprint, and like these are like this argument has really changed a lot. We added like an issues section, so like what issues did the student have, and then like some suggested next steps that were clickable. So like like you could select it for the next sprint if necessary, like the mentor could during the meeting time. And then like you could add focuses as well during the meeting. So we did actually test this version in a SIG meeting, and the test actually failed pretty hard. And I think the main reasons for this was what happened during SIG was it wasn't really used, and it wasn't used because there's a high cognitive load on the mentor. Really relied heavily on this research model made by Hauchi and Matt yesterday, and this was not really widely used beyond really our lab and Matt's students, as well as the students in Hauchi's sections of DTR. So it was not really easy to look at during the meeting. As you can see, there are just many fields to click and many kind of things to do, not super easy to follow along, and really just not really easy to go through. So we really had to pivot pretty hard from this interface because it really did not reach any of the goals that we were hoping to reach because it was not used during the meeting. So we pivoted to this new Snapshot interface. So the real goals for it was like, how can we make interface that was as lightweight as possible. Lightweight, it was pretty generalizable, so it didn't really rely on this research model because that was a big failure of last prototype, and as well as like really focused on reducing the number of probing questions, and mentor time was still like the goal. And we came up with this interface. So the first interface really was focused on like an input. So we gave the students instructions. It should take about 15 minutes to really reach motivation issues, but had 4 sections. This week so what you worked on this week. From this I learned what were your learnings, as well as what you struggled with, which was similar to the issue section, and then next week I will, which is your plan for next week. Each section had like the space right here for the student to fill out, so this would be empty normally, and then like on the right column would have instructions and some food for thought, which would be some extra probing questions to help them like really think about what to ask here. So we tested this, and the output came out to this interface. So we took that information, really just reformatted it, made it look nice, and we tested it in SIG. So we had students actually pull it up, and then we had other people pull it up as well. Got pretty good testing results. It was really usable. Everyone could see it on the screen as well as pull it up on their laptops because it's a Google Doc. Seemed like there was more feedback in the meeting in general because a lot of people were on board. It really acted as an anchor for the meeting. So if a student went down a different path, or like a mentor did, then you could come back to it. Like if you talked about learning, went down a whole path about study design, you could come back and talk about the next section. And it was really comprehensive of all the topics. So we like really try to focus on like what you did the previous week, what you learned from it, any issues you had, and your next steps, which is pretty comprehensive for the whole meeting. We'll move on to the second interface.
Yeah, so one of our big things with this interface is we really wanted to follow the sort of natural flow of discussion to kind of hit all the points that previously SIG meeting mentors would have had to really probe with a lot of questions to get at. And one of the sections that we spent a lot of time thinking about was the struggle section. So from the last interface, we asked students just what they struggled with, but we realized that what we really needed students to do was sort of build some of these regulation skills on their own so that they could kind of diagnose issues in their projects more readily by themselves over time. And so in order to help build those skills, we pivoted or switched our section 3, which was previously I struggled with, to I reflected on, and asked for 3 different things. First, we asked for an observed issue, which was like a low-level struggle that they hit during the sprint, and then we asked them to think about the impact of that as well as the high-level cause, and we put some food for thought here for each of these different sections. And so the hope here is that they can kind of get the practice in identifying like an issue that they're facing, but then also figure out what the high level sort of root cause for that is, address it, and then develop some new strategies moving forward that will help to sort of prevent some of their struggles from the previous week from happening again.
So from this, we are going to move on to our next step. So one of the next steps is really a full system for next quarter. I think we both think the design is pretty promising. From our interviews, students found a lot of value just doing it, as well as like mentors found value as well. So we want to actually like put a lot of work in designing a system with an interface, as well as doing a few more design iterations based off what we learned from our testing. One particular thing, like two particular things we want to talk about are like adding research models for students. So it is pretty generalizable, but how can we get like a few more like research models of best practices of how to do research through this process, as well as like during the input, how can we like give students the feedback we gave back earlier during the research kind of map or canvas phase, where we gave them like here's a format, here's the highlighting, like here's an example, like stuff like that, to help them like really think about how to best like write their answers here, as well as do their research.
And we also want to try to aim towards doing a larger study next quarter as well. We think that the Design for America community at our school is actually kind of a similar project and mentorship structure, so that we will be able to actually test the system with them. So our plan is to build out a working version of this full stack system, and then continue our design iterations, add features, and then release this system to be used by multiple DFA teams at Northwestern and abroad. We've also had the opportunities to submit some information for the undergraduate research grant. And from that, we received $2,000 of additional funding for the continuation of this research. So that'll be used for us to run the study. And our eventual goal is to submit a paper on this work to CSCW or CHI later this year. Thank you.
Thanks.